I was on campus when it happened. My office is right next to Temescal, so I started hearing firefighters going up that way, and I was like, okay, that's a little interesting. We gotten the warning the day before about high winds, but I didn't even think anything of it. So I walk outside, and if you sort of look northwest, you can see this giant sort of flame going up. So we evacuated campus, everybody got off, and then I grew up in the Palisades, so my family actually still lives in the Palisades. So I went to my parents' house and I got my stepfather, and we had to evacuate out of the campus. The good news was that we didn't have school that day. We were still in winter break at the time. We had some athletes on campus, so like our track team was there, our basketball teams were there. People got off campus really quick. I think they were fully evacuated by like 11:30, 12 o'clock. And the rest of the day was just kind of watching the news and seeing the devastation that happened. My parents' house burned down in the fire. I think that it survived the first sort of round that first day, but then when the winds hit that night, and it just kind of took everything in the Palisades. The statistic is 1 in 3 kids play a sport on campus. So if we have 3,000 students, we have 1,000 athletes, a huge portion of the school. And you got a lot of history of a lot of athletes. You got a lot of top end athletes in certain sports. You know, Steve Kerr obviously went to the Palisades. He talked about his mom's home, what that meant to him. There's just a long, rich history of Palisades athletics. And it is without question the most successful program in the city. And that's long before I ever got there. So it's not due to me in any way, shape, or form. We have more demand than we can actually offer, right? Like there was a time in which you never even cut for football. And now we have so many kids that want to play, like we just can't keep all the kids. The stadium is very iconic where it sits. There's a lot of movies and television that have had that there. So it's just, there's a very iconic look to what Pali is. And yeah, I mean, there's just a rich history of Palisades athletics. I haven't been on campus personally. They're still not allowing anybody else, basically, other than our director of operations, our facilities guys, and our security on campus. But they have been on campus, and they've sort of done an assessment. Basically, if you go from north side of Sunset down, the exteriors around the baseball field, which is basically landscaping and trees, that's pretty burnt, but the baseball field itself seems to be in pretty good shape. The back J buildings, where a lot of the old shop classes were that have now been converted, those have gone. The football field weight room, yeah, that's gone 100%. A lot of the temporary bungalow structures that were on campus they're just like tinder to that fire, and they just went up like that. The school was built in the 1950s, and it's brick and concrete, and the brick and concrete doesn't burn, and you can see that it didn't burn. But the newer temporary bungalows, they're just like, the gym is still in good shape. Everything inside of it is super smoky. And then once you get to the football field, the exteriors around the football field are burnt, but the actual field looks like it's in good shape. The track looks like it's in good shape. And then the continuation school below it is currently gone as well. So I'd say 70% of the school seems to be intact. Of the athletic facilities, I mean, an even higher percentage. Pool's in good shape too. So both fields, the pool and the gym, they seem to have survived kind of the worst of it. When Tuesday night hit, basically the devastation hit the Palisades, I knew that it was going to be a long road, and I knew that putting sports right away was not necessary, that we really had to make sure kids were okay. I mean, families were okay. The fires were still raging, so there was still a possibility that people could be in trouble. You know, a lot of our kids were immediately evacuated from the Palisades, but then as the fire pushed more and more towards Brentwood and West Los Angeles, we have a lot of kids that live in those areas too, so they started to evacuate as well. So I didn't want to push the first couple days to really get back to going anything until, LUSD schools were closed. So it's kind of just like, hey, wait and see. And then our administration had been meeting the whole time trying to figure out, okay, what options do we have? What do we think about doing? And it was our principal who really was like, hey, we need to think about getting back to playing sports. And then the biggest push more than anything else has been the athletes themselves. They really wanted to get back to it. And you have sort of both sides supporting you. I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and let's get after it. And so this week has been trying to find facilities, rescheduling games, figuring out what equipment we have, what jerseys we have, what do we need to get. I mean, we're not even close to finished with all that, but at least we returned to some sort of normalcy. We had 4 basketball games this week. We had girls basketball on Wednesday at Fairfax, and then next week our soccer is going to return, water polo is going to return. So it's just kind of getting back in some sort of a flow of, these kids want to play sports, they want to get out, they don't want to just be sitting on the whole time. This is what they practice, this is what they train for. If a kid can't do it, if a kid doesn't want to participate, if a family can't do it, we get that totally. We just want to on offer for them to come and do it if they want to. There's been so much support that's been offered. We've had so many schools that have offered. We've had schools that we practiced at. El Segundo High School has offered themselves. We were doing our cheers practices over there this week. Soccer was over there. Westside Neighbor School had offered for our basketball teams. Brentwood School we practiced at. Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, they reached out to me. We already got field space for our soccer teams. Our league has been super great about understanding what we're going through. And if we need to schedule all of our games away, they understand that, and they're sort of taking that on. A bunch of different vendors. We've talked to Nike, we've talked to some of the professional teams, the Dodgers. The support has been huge. It's still logistically difficult, especially when you don't have a regular field to go to. But I think as time goes, every single week, it'll get more and more, it'll get better, basically. Everything has been positive. I think after our game yesterday, everybody in the gym stood up and clapped. It was a good feeling. Sort of return to normalcy. It's been sort of an escape away from knowing what the future is and where we're going to have school and how we're going to do that. I know whose homes are gone. I know I asked them where they're staying. I feel that I'm not being personally displaced. I live in Culver Palms area, but my parents are. And the first 4 days was trying to figure out what to do with them and the uncertainty of that. A lot of it is weird, crazy stories of, hey, some kid's house in an area with the rest of the houses are all gone, but their house is still there. And you're like, man, it's amazing, amazing. It's how did that happen? And you just sort of laugh about it. I'm sure there's still a lot of grieving going on. And I don't want to push people away from grieving, but a lot of people, once they sort of get through it, are like, all right, let's get to the next thing. Let's go work out. Let's go train. That's where I'm at to try to help them out do you need to grieve? Do that. I'm not a grieving counselor, and take your time. But if you are trying to get back to playing sports, I'm all here for it. I'm going to do everything I can to help you guys out. When can we be back on site? We don't really know, Yeah, the facility looks good, but we're also relying upon, you got governmental officials to tell you whether or not what you can and can't get back on. You have to clean the facility, you got to discontaminate, all those things within the first week, especially considering we're not even allowed to be back on site. No idea. They'll start school next Tuesday. It's going to be a virtual school, but our administration is working like crazy to find some sort of physical site. There's definitely a PTSD when it comes to online learning. You could just tell kids don't want to do it. Teachers don't want to do it. Every time we think about it, we're not as restricted as we are in COVID. We can still, if we want to set up things where the kids can meet at a place, and we can play sports, right? We can do stuff that's different than COVID. Ideally, we don't want to stay as being online, but let's not be trapped in the idea of what COVID was, because COVID was it all shut down. You can't leave your house. Everything's online. This is, hey, if we have to do some weeks of online learning, then we can do some stuff where we're meeting at a place. We can do that. And I think when people remember that, it sort of eases the tension. But the logistics of trying to take a campus that was 3,000 kids, there was 1,000 athletes, and now we're playing 6 or 7 sports. And then in 2-3 weeks, we're going to start our spring sports. So you're adding another 10, 12 sports. But the nice thing is that a lot of people who would want that answer, they go, yeah, I know it's a fluid situation. They just stay fluid. So if people are interested, the best way is to donate to the school. If they have a specific sport they're interested in, they can donate specifically for that sport. So if they really love wrestling, they can donate and give specifically to wrestling. Come out, support the teams. That's a huge, huge piece of it. The Mile High view, it's kind of like, hey, if you want to help us, give to the program specifically, and it will go to whatever we can get for these kids. That's kind of the way to support the kids.